I'd like to call to order the Chesapeake Bay Board meeting for Wednesday, June 12th. It is the responsibility of this board to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries to the Chesapeake Bay. Roll call, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip? Mr. Waltrip is absent at the moment. Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Ms. Bowie?
Here.
That's my understanding. Mr. Waltrip will be joining us shortly. Yep. You've had a chance to review the minutes from the May 8th meeting. Any changes or additions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
To approve minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from the May 8th meeting as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? They are approved. We've reached the public comment period of our agenda. The public comment period offers a chance for community members to express their opinions. Topics discussed shall not directly relate to a specific public hearing item. To participate, speakers must provide their name and address for the record. Would anybody care to address the board during the public hearing, or excuse me, public comment period? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. For the public hearings, the outline for tonight's public hearings will be a staff presentation followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. Presentations before the board are subject to time limits. After everyone wishing to speak has done so and discussion among the board has concluded, the public hearing will be closed. First item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0051 at 105 Shellbank. Ms. Benedict.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0051. Mr. Bruce Chrisman has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a fire pit and patio located at 105 Shellbank Drive within the Shellbank subdivision in the James River watershed. On the screen above, you'll see the parcel outlined in blue and the James River watershed boundary in yellow. This parcel was platted in 2001 prior to the changes in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here is aerial photography of the parcel. Aerial photography. Here we have topography. There is a pretty sharp slope down here towards the bottom of the property as we near the water. The floodplain as it affects this property, and the resource protection area that comes up to just about the back of the existing home. The total lot size of this property is 1.14 acres, of which 27% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to construct a fire pit and patio to the rear of the existing home. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 380 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA. On the screen above, you'll see the 100-foot and 50-foot resource protection area in red, and then the proposed fire pit and surrounding patio here right by the border of the 50-foot seaward RPA buffer. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1 planting unit, which is 1 canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 3 shrubs. The applicant in the area indicated by this green cloud is proposing to plant 2 canopy trees and 3 shrubs, which satisfies county mitigation requirements. Additionally, the applicant has provided patio detail, again showing the fire pit in the center, pea gravel for the actual patio surrounding, and then a paver border around that patio area. Here is site photography at the property. The stake indicates the middle of that fire pit, and then the patio extending out from there. This is looking back towards the existing home on the property and looking out towards the water. And then back across towards that slope down to the water on the property. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a fire pit and patio. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a fire pit and patio is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a surety of $1,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 1 planting unit. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by June 12, 2025, and written requests for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than May 1st, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Questions for Robin? Robin, just refresh my memory. The county still considers the pea gravel substrate as impervious?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. With no questions, I will open the public hearing. Would anybody care to address the board on this matter? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and discussion amongst the board. Fairly straightforward.
Straightforward to me, Mr. Chair. I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0051 at 105 Shellbank Drive.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt. Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Perfect timing. Mr. Wilson, please note that Mr. Waltrip has arrived. Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0052 at 105 Mahogany Run.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Emily Grogine, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0052. Mr. Corey Bell, Williams Landscape and Design, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Anthony and Ms. Kathleen Zotto for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a patio, fireplace, and water feature located at 105 Mahogany Run within the Fords Colony subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. The subject parcel is here in blue, and that Powhatan Creek watershed highlighted in yellow. The parcel was platted in 1996 prior to the changes in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here we see the subject parcel, the current topography, along with the current RPA delineation. The total lot size of this property is 0.53 acres, of which 53% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to install a new 368 square foot patio and fireplace extending off an existing 126 square foot patio previously approved under case number CBE 14-030. Additionally, the applicants are seeking approval for an existing 71 square foot water feature. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 439 square feet of new impervious surface in the landward 50-foot RPA. The proposed patio is 368 square feet of impact to the landward 50-foot RPA. Due to this water feature approval being after the fact, mitigation requirements for this 71 square foot portion are doubled. Total required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1.5 planting units, or 1 canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 7 shrubs. With 1 planting unit accounting for the proposed patio and fireplace, the additional half unit comes from the after-the-fact water feature, with 2 shrubs being doubled to 4 shrubs. The applicants have provided a mitigation plan equating to 16 shrubs and 2 understory trees, therefore satisfying county mitigation requirements. So an overall view here in green, we have those proposed mitigation plantings along with that existing pondless water feature. And right here we have that existing patio that was approved under CBE 14-030. All the proposed work is going to occur in the 50-foot landward RPA buffer. Moving in closer, just to give you a better view of that proposed work. Moving on, starting kind of to the right here, we see where it's going to be going. And then moving left, you kind of see that fountain and water feature hiding back there along with that existing patio here to your left. And this is just an opposite shot, kind of looking more upslope of where that proposed work is going to be. And again, that existing patio is behind the shrubs here. Moving closer, there's the fountain, better shot, and then that waterscape feature. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a patio, fireplace, and water feature. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a patio is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not a substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed, which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicants must submit a surety of $1,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 1.5 planting units. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by June 12, 2025. And written request for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than May 1st, 2025, or 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for staff?
One quick one. 1.5 planting units. But
1.5 is the total mitigation and accounting for the after-the-fact water feature. 1.5.
Emily, is there any control for runoff proposed? I noticed it appeared anyway from the photograph that they were getting close to the edge of slope or an increase in slope. Is anything proposed for runoff other than the vegetation?
Other than the vegetation, I don't believe so, but I'm happy to defer that to the applicant.
Thank you very much. With that, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant care to address the board?
Nate Reams, Williams Landscape and Design, 1554 Penniman Road. And I can address that issue that you, Mr. Chair. We would be putting up a silt fence to prevent any possible potential for erosion down the hill
So during construction?
during construction, correct?
I was more thinking of in the long term, as you might get heavy rain and sheet flow coming off the impervious area. Is there any thought to either
Yes.
beds that might absorb it, or?
Yes, I don't know if we can pull up the plan again, but we did propose to put the mitigation plants surrounding the patio on that lower slope to mitigate that potential runoff.
Gotcha. Very good. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll leave the public hearing open. The matter is before the board for discussion.
Like they pretty much got everything covered here as far as the mitigation planning and the runoff. Pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Chair, I would agree with Mr. Waltrip's assessment with the minor impact such as this. I would be in support of this application.
Good. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board. You have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0052 at 105 Mahogany Run.
Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0047 at 3120 Windy Branch Drive.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0047. Mr. Mitchell Foos with the King's Garden has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Jeremy and Miss Mary Skaggs for encroachment into the RPA buffer for the construction of a patio, seating wall, and outdoor fireplace located at 3120 Windy Branch Drive within the Stonehouse subdivision in the Ware Creek watershed. The subject parcel is outlined here above in blue and the watershed boundary shown in yellow. This parcel was platted in 2001 prior to the changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here is aerial photography of the property, topography at the property, and the resource protection area that comes up to the back of the house. The total lot size is 0.55 acres, of which 53% is located within the RPA. Additionally, for your information, there is conservation easement on the property, which is shown above in green. The applicants are proposing to construct a patio, seating wall, and outdoor fireplace behind the existing house. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 284 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA. Above is an overall site plan showing the house, the 100-foot and 50-foot resource protection areas, and then the proposed construction in yellow. Zooming in closer to that proposed construction, we have the area of the patio that is within the buffer region, as well as the seating wall that goes around the patio, and then the fireplace, which is this area on the right of the patio. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 10 shrubs. The applicants have proposed a mitigation plan that satisfies this mitigation requirement. And those plantings are shown above in green that include items such as a maple, dogwood, and some inkberry holly bushes. Here is site photography looking at the corner of the house and the area of the proposed patio. And again, just a better angle of that proposed area, as well as conditions for the rest of the yard. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a patio, seating wall, and outdoor fireplace. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by this board because the construction of a patio, seating wall, and outdoor fireplace are considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicants must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 10 shrubs. The exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by June 12, 2025, and written requests for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than May 1st, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Robin? Just curious, did you happen to notice the condition of the retaining wall? Was it in fairly good condition?
Yes, the retaining wall showed no signs of failure. It seemed to be in good shape.
Is the plantings gonna be on the inside of the retaining wall or the outside?
The inside of the retaining wall.
Inside.
Yes, sir.
And so retaining wall will remain like it is.
Correct.
Does the retaining wall go all the way to the end of the property? It looked like it stopped before that.
It stops on the right side, yes, where this patio is going. So it's right here before that patio, and then it goes to just on the other side of the house.
So there's no retaining wall near those bushes on the right.
Correct.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Mr. Chair, I think my only, concern with this one, it would be nice to see the retaining wall extend out further to kind of minimize that slope for, sheet flow off of there. But I think overall, with this minor impact, I would support this.
Yeah, the way I
application.
interpreted the plan, or at least the pictures, was, and the question for the retaining wall is, I imagine that sheet flow will actually migrate into the backyard and behind that existing wall. Unless I'm mistaken. And Robin, can you comment on that? Am I misinterpreting how that is going to flow?
I would say that your interpretation is correct. With the topography of the area back here, it does slope towards that retaining wall and away from the area of the proposed patio.
Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, I would be in support of this application.
Any other comments or questions? The matter is before the board. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception requests for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 24-0047.
Mr. Wilson.
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley. Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 24-0046 at 4820 Wellesley Boulevard.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Emily Grogine, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0046. Mr. Scott Massey, Massey Construction and Land Management LLC, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Ms. Kelly Cornell, Villages of Westminster HOA, for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a concrete swale, additional storm drains, and associated grading located at 4820 Wellesley Boulevard within the Villages of Westminster subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. As you can see, it's a slightly large parcel, but we're focusing mainly on the area here, and then again that watershed boundary in yellow. The parcel was platted in 2002 prior to the changes in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here we have that subject parcel. Here's the pool, along with the existing topography, the RPA buffer. The total lot size of this property is 2.89 acres, 0.19 acre project area, of which 39% is located within the RPA. In February of 2024, officials from the James City County Stormwater and Resource Protection Division received notice that a concrete swale and a new storm drains were being installed on this property without the submission of a Chesapeake Bay Preservation Exception request. The applicant stopped all construction and began the process of obtaining a permit for the proposed work. The applicant is proposing to install a 3-foot wide concrete swale around an existing pool with 2 additional storm drains and associated grading. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 432 square feet of new impervious surface within the 50-foot landward RPA buffer. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 11 shrubs. Because this exception request is being heard before the board after the fact, staff would require double the mitigation units equaling 22 shrubs. The applicant has proposed a mitigation plan equating to 30 shrubs, therefore satisfying county mitigation requirements. So in yellow here, within the 50 landward RPA buffer is where the proposed construction is to take place, with the swale coming around the entirety here, with the 2 storm inlets being proposed here and here, with that outlet located here. Here we have the proposed mitigation plantings. The applicants are looking to replant in this area specifically because there is a drainage easement in this area here. Moving in closer, you can see that a bit better with, again, those 2 storm inlets being built, with the outlet occurring right here, and again, that swale and the proposed plantings in green. Here, if you're looking down from that one corner here, where that swale is going to be, you can see kind of where that framing is in place for the proposed swale. Moving along towards the back, again, we see that swale kind of coming up along here where these 2 storm inlets will be. And here we have storm inlet 1 up here in the corner, and the additional one closer to that outlet down this way. Moving closer, that outlet, unfortunately I don't have a photo of it exactly, it comes out to the left right here. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a concrete swale, additional storm drains, and associated grading. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the installation of a concrete swale, additional storm drains, and the associated grading is outside of the scope of administrative approval. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not a substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed. And reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be moderate for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a surety of $2,000 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plan equaling 30 shrubs. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by June 12th, 2025, and written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than May 1st, 2025, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for staff?
Is this a job that was started and never completed? I see the drains, the inlets, these round ones already in place. Is this something that was started and then never completed, or what?
So upon discovery back in February of the work occurring without a Ches Bay exception request, the applicant halted all of the project until approval was given by the board.
It was started before. I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So the purpose of the swale is for stormwater, or will it receive water from the pool at all?
I'm going to defer that question to the applicant.
I do have a question on the outlet. Is there energy dissipation? Do they anticipate flows that would be erosive?
I'm going to defer that question to the applicant as well.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you very much. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board?
Good afternoon, I'm Scott Massey, the owner of Massey Construction Land Management. Can you pull the drawing back up for me, please?
Scott, can you give us your address just for the record?
6101 Phil Bates Creek Road,
Thank you.
Barhamsville, Virginia. On the end of the yellow finger there, where the storm drain will outfall, there's a soccer field right there, or sports field, whatever you want to call it. That's where the flared in section is right there, and that's where there'll be a riprap. We weren't going to use riprap. We were going to use 6-inch to 8-inch river rock with kids and everything there.
Yeah.
Use the river rock rather than riprap there, and install it the way you would normally install your normal riprap outfall with the fabric and so on. As far as answering the question on the drainage swale, the only water that the concrete drainage swale is receiving is the water off of the deck of the pool. And what was happening is you can see in the drawing there, you can see the trench drains that are in the pool there, or in that pool deck. Those trench drains were outfalling onto the outside perimeter. And in the very back corner there, right in that area there was about a 6 to 8 foot deep wash in the back corner back there that was washing out. There's a light pole there also. The light pole had tilted over, and that wash was actually undermining the pool deck in that corner there. Somebody had already temporarily fixed it before and shoved a bunch of riprap and fabric in there. That had failed again. And that's when they had asked me to come in and look at how to fix this. And we recommended putting in the concrete swale. And you don't see it on this drawing, but the concrete swale has several high points in it. This concrete swale from this corner here takes all the water to the storm drain that's already installed down in the corner on that end. So it was already going that way. We didn't change any of the drainage at all. So where the water was draining, it's still draining there. We just stopped it from going to that one corner and put it down onto the flat soccer field. So that way it didn't wash out the backside. So the water from this corner goes to the corner there, and then it makes the turn and goes around and down to the soccer field. Yes, makes the turn here, goes into that drop inlet, goes to the next drop inlet, and then down to the soccer field. So we stopped it from going over the hill, washing out the hill, and down into the wetlands, and putting it down onto a flat ground at the soccer field where it could spread the water out, and that acts as an energy dissipator as well.
Yeah. Very good.
So that was the whole purpose behind it all.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
pull the matter in front of the board for discussion?
Like a good solution.
Yeah, I think they're solving a problem, not creating one, so.
I agree.
With that, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Like it's a needed scenario that needs to be done to correct the problem, so I would support it.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA-24-0046 at 4820 Wesley Boulevard.
Mr. Wilson?
Motion to adopt, Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie, Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 240065 at 9400 Barnes Road.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 24-0065. Mr. Mark Boyd with Kimley Horn and Associates has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of L.I. Hazelwood Farms for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the grading associated with the construction of a building and construction of a retaining wall located at 9400 Barnes Road within the Diascan Creek watershed. The entirety of the parcel is shown here in blue, along with the watershed shown in yellow. This parcel was platted prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here is aerial photography of the subject parcel as a whole, and then zooming in a little bit closer on the actual area of impact. Here is topography across the site, as well as the resource protection area shown here in green. A wetland delineation and RPA study was performed in 2023 and approved by the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the county respectively. The total lot size of this property is 130 acres, of which 26% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to construct a building and retaining wall in association with the Levitt 64 Commerce Center construction. Case number CBPA 23-0174 for the same proposed impacts was heard before this board last month on May 8, 2024, where the application was denied. Impervious cover impacts to the RPA will be caused by the construction of a drive aisle and retaining wall and equal approximately 53,143 square feet of impacts to the RPA. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 121,045 square feet. Construction of this building will also result in permanent impacts to wetlands and stream channels. Above is the plan for the entirety of the Levitt 64 Commerce Center, but we are speaking specifically about Building 1. So zooming in on that impact, the resource protection area, the 100-foot resource protection area is shown over here in red, along with those impacts, again, from either grading, the retaining wall, or the drive aisle shown in yellow. Zooming in closer on those impacts, the largest of which, again, for the impervious cover and some of the grading, additional grading, some minor grading in this impact area, and then again for the construction of the retaining wall. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts is the recordation of a deed of natural open space for an area twice the size of the impacted RPA outside of all required stormwater forested open space. This is equivalent to an area of 242,090 square feet or 5.56 acres. The applicant has proposed to include 1 additional acre of natural open space as mitigation for the impacts, equaling a total of 6.56 acres of natural open space easement, or 115% of the required amount. Here is site photography standing in the existing cleared field and looking towards the area of impact. And again, further down towards the bottom of the proposed building, and standing further back, just looking at the site as a whole. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the grading associated with the construction of a building and construction of a retaining wall. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the project is outside of the scope of an administrative approval. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Should the board find that the exception request meets all 5 conditions outlined above, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must record a deed of natural open space in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse for the 6.56 acres of natural open space beyond that which is required to meet stormwater management compliance for the project prior to the issuance of a land disturbing permit. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by June 12th, 2029, making this a 5-year approval. And written requests for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than May 1st, 2029, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions?
Yeah, I wasn't here last month, so you might have already answered this question, but I had 2 questions. One is the building envelope. Is that in that meadow that's already cleared, or is there going to be those trees going to be removed as well?
I believe there will be tree removal associated with this project.
So those last 3 photographs, there'll be tree removal.
Yes, but I will have the applicant clarify for you as well.
Clarified that. And then the second question has to do with the 6.5 acres. Is that on this property or somewhere else? That's for easement.
It will have to be on
Conservation.
the property, but I don't have a plat to show you the area of that easement yet.
Maybe the applicant just pointed out on the general map.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. The applicant or his agent care to address the board?
Evening, Chair and members of the board. Ben Swift with Levitt Industrial, 923 15th Street, Northwest, Washington, D.C. So I'll try and be brief, but for the benefit of those that weren't present, I'll run through some things I highlighted in the last meeting, and staff did a great job summarizing the proposal. So I'll try and be brief. But high level, the site was rezoned back in 2022 for a mixed-use commercial industrial rezone and zoned economic opportunity. This proposed and envisioned roughly 3.6 million square feet of industrial. Since then, we have pared that back down to about 2.2 million square feet in order to minimize impacts to wetlands and RPA to the maximum extent possible. And in January of 2024, we received, excuse me, if I click this, will it go to, oh, perfect. Oh, perfect. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. So in January 2024, we received all DEQ and core permits required for all the wetland impacts proposed as a part of this entire project, phase 1 and phase 2. And just to highlight what's not seen on this site plan, this is phase 1 and part of phase 2. The remaining buildings that are not shown, there's a small building exactly there, and then another smaller building in that, more or less peninsula finger there. And that's the extent of what we are currently proposing. And specifically as it relates to this building, to address the size, it's exactly the size it is, which is roughly 1 million square feet for a very specific reason. And that is industrial tenant demands as it relates to sizing are very specific. They range from 100,000 feet, at least in developments of this size, up to about 500,000 feet. And there really isn't any demand for anything between 500,000 and 1,000,000 feet. So that's hence the reason for the 1,000,000 footer, especially in this region. There is a significant lack of these size facilities, and there's an extraordinary demand for them. And so that's, so pairing that back to, say, 800,000 feet wouldn't unfortunately be marketable to any tenant and wouldn't be something developable in this case. And also on top of that, the cost to get to that pad is quite significant. You have to cross a stream and put in culverts and bring all the utilities down there. And due to that cost, that's another reason why that level of square footage is required to merit those costs. And then to highlight a couple additional things that staff mentioned, the mitigation, we are proposing 6.56 acres on site, and to point out exactly where, if you can see where the mouse is right down there, that area right along the RPA will be where all of the mitigation land for all of the proposed impacts will be deed restricted. And that plat is in process, but that is where the area will be, and that abuts the county park and the RPA, so we figured that was probably the best location for it. And then to address some additional items that I didn't mention last time but wanted to bring up, and that during construction, obviously erosion and sediment control are top of mind, and obviously there's the code requirements, but just to highlight what we will be doing is we will be including super silt fence along all areas of disturbance that abut the RPA and wetland areas. And then in addition to that, we will have all the standard E&S measures that are required by code and county. And then for this site specifically, they were quite extensive for good reason. And then in addition to that, we will be on site about once a week, confirming that the contractor has maintained all mitigation or all erosion control measures. And if there's a broken silt fence, that they repair it immediately. And in addition to that, there will be an inspector, due to the size, there will be an inspector on site every 4 days to also confirm that the contractor is maintaining all E&S measures and that there's no, and basically avoiding to the maximum extent possible erosion and sediment issues and seepages through the silt fence and into the RPN wetlands. So I'll stop there and take any additional questions if there are any.
Questions for Mr. Swift?
No questions, Mr. Chair, but I would like to disclose, I did meet with Mr. Swift following our last meeting, just to disclose that. He had additional questions based on my concerns that I articulated at the previous hearing, and Mr. Swift summarized their mitigation measures that they were planning on during that meeting. So I just wanted to disclose that.
Very good. Thank you. Any additional questions?
Wall that you've got in there, it looks like it's a steep wall. Is that a step back type wall holding that steep area on the right hand side?
The retaining wall there, it's
wall.
a single, it will have a slope back to it, but it is a single tier because of the specific location. It'll be a keystone wall most likely, and it will be slanted back, but it ranges in height from 1 foot to 20 feet in some cases, and it'll be engineered to more than handle the capacity that and it'll have drainage ditches to ensure that water flows around and there's no erosion issues there, but it'll be likely a keystone wall.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Would anybody else care to address the board on this matter? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chair, I did have concerns that I articulated at the last meeting, but it is nice to hear Mr. Swift. I know the applicant has done a lot of work on this site to try to mitigate to mitigate stormwater and whatnot. And with the, setting aside of the deed restricted property adjacent to Upper County Park and the super silt fence and all the inspections and things like that, I feel more confident in supporting this application at this time.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? I agree with Mr. May, and I think it is my intention to support the application moving forward. There's no other comments. I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board. Do I have a motion?
I'll make it, motion to adopt a resolution to grant exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board CBPA 24-0065 at 9400 Barnes Road.
Mr. Wilson?
Motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wilson, I don't see anything under board considerations or matters of special privilege.
I would like to just alert the board that we will most likely have a July meeting for both wetlands and Ches Bay, and also an August meeting. We tentatively have 2 cases for the August meeting.
Thank you very much. If there's no other business before the board, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
So moved. We are adjourned.